Before we get started, I just want to make a brief announcement about the state of the pod. We've been getting tons of amazing feedback from women, and it's become very clear to us that a lot of women are thirsty for this type of content. This is a niche in women's media that is desperately needed and has been neglected for a very long time. And we really want to be able to make more content. There's just one problem, and that's money. We would love to be able to quit our day jobs and work full-time on content creation, and the only thing holding us back is the fact that we got bills to pay, if I'm being totally honest. Long term, though, we would like to expand into other forms of media, such as video, TikTok, newsletters, ebooks, even like real physical books, and so on. And that's why we've set a new Patreon goal. As soon as we hit $10,000 monthly revenue, that will be enough for us to afford to quit our jobs and start working on growing FDS full time. Currently, our schedules only really allow us to post about 60 to 90 minutes of bonus content per month. And as a reward to our patrons for helping achieve this target, we will commit to posting more bonus content. So if you like FDS and you want us to grow and you want us to make more content, you can support us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Female Dating Strategy. Thank you so much to everyone who listened and shared to help us to get to where we are now. And I'm sure this is a sign of even greater things to come. Thank you.
What's up, queens? Welcome to the Female Dating Strategy Podcast, the meanest female-only podcast on the internet. I'm your host, Ro.
And this is Savannah.
And I'm Lilith.
And today, we're going to discuss the biggest mistakes women make when trying to communicate with men.
Yeah, so in this episode, we're going to tackle just communicate.
The old just communicate.
The good old Reddit advice.
It's not even just Reddit, to be fair. It's literally all of women's magazines. Just communicate with your partner about, honestly, anything from cannibalism.
I found child porn on my boyfriend's computer. Oh, just communicate with him.
Yeah, anything from cannibalism to he left the milk out, right? The answer is always to just communicate, which is actually insane, as we've discussed before in a lot of scenarios. So we're going to talk about why just communicate as a strategy is often really, really ineffective.
Yeah, I feel like women have been lied to about, how to communicate with men. Like the concept just communicate, you imagine, say you have a problem with your boyfriend and you think to yourself, oh, I'm just going to sit down with him and we'll have a heartfelt conversation about why this bothers me. And then he'll listen and then he'll care and then he'll change his behavior accordingly, right? Wrong. That's not how it fucking works.
High value men will. We should actually preface that to say most high value men will make an effort to change if you communicate things with them earnestly. But even in those scenarios, there's just some marked differences between how men and women communicate with each other, communicate with members of their own sex, and massive differences in the way that we're socialized that make the communication between men and women difficult.
Yeah, I'd say even high value men sometimes can fall into these traps where, it depends how you're communicating, right? Because sometimes when you're communicating and you're just like emoting, but you go into that conversation without a strategy, you're still not going to be able to get your point across as effectively as if you did go into it with a strategy. And that's even with a high value man, simply because, men and women who've not received the same socialization, even if he's a generally decent guy, he's still received male socialization. And also like the society that we live in, the risks and rewards and the consequences for doing things or not doing certain things are different for men and women. And that's why I think like women and men, when they're communicating with one another, just end up sort of like talking at each other, but don't really understand each other, or underlying behavior ends up not changing.
Yeah, soft skills are a thing you can spend a lifetime learning because it's just a matter of putting yourself in a lot of different situations with a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. Sex differences are the most talked about and seemingly sometimes the most unsolvable. We're going to at least attempt to discuss why sometimes the tactics that women try when trying to communicate with men so often fall flat, and why so much of the mainstream advice about just communicate as this being this catch-all for relationship problems more or less won't work.
Yeah, the women's magazines will be like, oh, just communicate. And if she's like, I did communicate. And like, oh, but did you communicate the right way? You have to say it the right tone of voice. You don't want to, say it in a way that's going to get him defensive, or you don't want to do this, or you want to do that. And
it can come across victim blamey, right? It can come across like, oh, well, you're responsible for his behavior because you didn't communicate the right way.
So in this episode, we're just going to go into some of my theories, why I think that communication between men and women often falls flat, some of the male-female communication dynamics. We're going to talk about some of the common mistakes that women make when dealing with men and offer some more effective solutions. And some of this will apply to both men and women, like all humans. Some will apply to both high-value men and low-value men. Some will only be true for low-value men. So let's get into it. I want to start off by saying all humans, both male and female, are motivated by two things: fear of loss and desire for gain. Fear of loss and desire for gain is something that I learned as part of my sales training. And one of the things you learn in sales is that when you're talking to customers, it's not enough to just be really friendly and nice to them. People aren't going to buy something from you because you're a nice person or because they feel bad for you if they don't buy it. People are motivated by generally self-interest, and that doesn't make them a bad person or anything. Like, all humans are motivated by self-interest. And those two main things are fear of loss and desire for gain. That's just something like we're all instinctually sort of like programmed to care about. And even, people think like, oh, but what about altruism? What about doing the right thing? That kind of stuff. And generally speaking, like, altruism is not that motivating. People are not that motivated by altruism. And they'll only do altruistic things if the loss is low or there's something to gain from it.
I think we get so much performative altruism, right?
Yeah. Like, Coca-Cola doesn't really give a shit about polar bears. They're only doing it for the tax breaks and for the marketing, okay?
And just about everybody on Twitter with a blue check is motivated by performative altruism, where it's like, it's the perceived social gain, right?
Yeah, and I mean, people think that, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we need to really sort of destigmatize the reality. Like, people will say, oh, that's so cynical that people are motivated by self-interest. Yeah, that's just how it is, right? Like, that doesn't make you a bad person. It's just the reality of being a person. But anyways, the thing is, though, because of gender roles and because men and women are socialized differently, fear of loss and desire for gain play out differently in men versus women. I find that men are generally permitted to be more selfish than women. They're not punished for it, and so there's no fear of loss. And in fact, generally, they are rewarded for it. So men on average have more to gain from being selfish than women. Whereas women, we're raised to be endlessly self-sacrificial and to put other people's needs before our own. And from a very young age, girls are pretty much bullied out of our natural self-preservation instincts, right? We're punished much more harshly for quote-unquote selfish behavior. So women have more to lose from being selfish, and we're praised when we're selfless and show empathy. And so as we grow up, women, because we've been taught that being selfless and being giving and generous is a good thing, we grow up thinking that we will be continuously rewarded for selfless behavior. And then we end up in relationships with men, and this could not be further from the truth. So mistake number one is appealing to a man's empathy or morality. And so an example of that would be like, please stop doing this because it hurts my feelings, or please stop doing this because it's wrong, or something like that. And basically, it's a mistake because men have just not been socialized to feel empathy for women.
Well, I think I want to almost say, it's not that they're completely devoid of empathy for women. It's just that things that bother us are not perceived as something they feel obligated to participate in a solution for, right? I mean, there's just this mentality with men, especially how men communicate with other men. It's like every man for himself. So when women need things or women want things, especially relationship wise, I think a lot of them just have this blank space where they can't fill in the reason why, right?
Yeah, they just don't care.
Yeah.
They just don't. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what are some examples of my own relationships. Honestly, some of them are so embarrassing to talk about. Women often find ourselves begging for a text back or begging for basic human decency and good treatment and stuff. And men, they just don't, asking them to do it because it's something that you want or it would make you happy. First of all, low value man just isn't going to care about making you happy. So if he's low value, that's when it's time to move on. But it's also important to remember that men and women are just held to a very different standard of morality. Like women are expected to
make other people comfortable. I don't think men worry about whether other people are comfortable, right?
Exactly.
In fact, yeah. Whereas women, it's more of a knee-jerk reaction for us to look at the betterment of the group and instead of just ourselves. Whereas for men, as long as someone's not dying, there's not necessarily a reason for them to go out of their way to like scan and make sure everyone is okay and everyone's feeling good. It's just not necessarily in their socialization.
Exactly, right? And you see this all the time. Like men know to appeal to a woman's empathy. And I see men do this all the time. And they're like, what about men's mental health? And what about this? Like, when women are saying, oh, we're afraid of men because some men are rapists and stuff, men are like, oh, but not all men. And it makes us feel bad when women think that some of us could be rapists and stuff. And then women are like, oh, like you poor baby, like, acting like he's a wounded bird or something like that.
Notice how they don't do anything that might cost them anything to make men as a group look less like rapists, right? They don't want to do anything to change that. They just want you to not believe that.
Yeah, like they just want, it's all purely about like their ego, right? Basically, like, men know to manipulate women's empathy because they know that we have it. When women try to manipulate a man's empathy, it just doesn't work because there's no empathy to manipulate. You could manipulate his ego or his stupidity or something else like that, but there's just, it's like getting blood out of a stone. It's just, they just don't have it, right? They just don't see it the same way that we do. I do want to say, side note, like be very careful, even though I say, generally speaking, men don't feel empathy for women, I will say be very careful about men who seem too empathetic. Empathy is a good quality, but I've also met a lot of these like soft boy types that are very good at performing empathy, or, you'll have a conversation with him about your feelings and he'll be like, oh, totally. I'm so glad we can have this open conversation and talk about each other's needs and stuff, but then nothing changes. Right. Or he'll change for like a week or two and his behavior goes right back to normal. Yeah. So some guys will like perform empathy just because they think that that's what you want to hear. But they won't actually change because they have no incentive to. And that's really what it comes down to. Men are just not socialized to try and make women comfortable. Part of it is because there's just no incentive for them to do it. And there's no consequences for them not doing it. Socially, men have nothing to lose by not having empathy for women. In fact, to have empathy for women for a lot of men is a loss. For a man to have empathy for women would be to acknowledge their part in male violence. And that would involve a loss of dominance or loss of control, loss of privileges. When men show empathy to women, they are seen as a simp or pussy whipped or white knighting and so on. So to actually feel empathy for women is a loss for a lot of men.
And I think an important point to make in this section is that when women try to appeal to a man's morality in the Just Communicate saga, it's overlooking the fact that a lot of men know that they're behaving in a shitty way, because if you treated them the same way they're treating you, they would not like it at all. So there's a sense of almost
entitlement,
yeah, and superiority, in that they feel that they can treat you in a particular way, but then when the boot's on the other foot, they wouldn't like it and they wouldn't stand for it. So it's not that they don't know that, what's right and wrong and, how to treat and, how to speak to people. It's just that they feel entitled to treat you badly and to get away with it.
I think they just perceive it as like necessary double standards too, right? Because I remember...
They see it as their right.
Yeah, I remember reading an essay from a guy who had grown up in a very patriarchal type culture. I think he was like a Southern Baptist type guy. And him talking about how certain aspects of their culture that was passed down to him, he just accepted without thinking about it. It was something that was just the way it was. And so for a lot of men, if they're not making a concerted effort to unlearn some of the messaging they get about how women think and feel, women's place in society, who they should be in relation to women, then they won't, right? It won't occur to them that these things are wrong. It won't occur to them that women have a problem with it. And then when they see women that do have a problem with it, there's always a quick and easy way to discredit her, right? She's a slut. She's a bitter old post-wall spinster, right? There's very, very easy ways to take someone's behavior or perceived behavior and then use that to discredit the validity of their argument. And that's not just done between men and women. That's done on so many different levels. But that's a key part of it too, is that if they don't make that effort, then they won't empathize with the things that women want them to empathize with, because they won't see it as a problem. They'll just think, well, this is the way it is. Or what about men? Or men have this going on, etc.
And they know it's one-sided. Like, they expect women to feel empathy for men, but they don't think it's their job to feel empathy for women. And in fact, like, just the way that society is structured right now, men have nothing to gain from having empathy for women, and they have everything to lose. And so my solution, my alternative is, as a woman, you have to be the one to enforce consequences. And I know that might sound really harsh, but quite frankly, like, as so long as men are living in this world where not having empathy for women gets them the result that they want and they're not punished for it, they're just going to continue to do that because they have no incentive to change.
I mean, that's the general female dating strategy philosophy. And at least we can't control that, on a society-wide scale, but for the most part, most of us can control that within our relationships, barring certain types of cultures where women really don't have as many choices. But to the extent that you can, the idea is to enforce consequences, and usually that's the loss of your presence for men who don't extend the level of empathy that you feel is necessary.
Exactly. And so, yeah, usually it means the loss of your presence or loss of your attention. That's why we tell women, like, block and delete. If a guy, once you identify that a guy's low value, that's when you should leave him. We do understand for a lot of women, they're not going to leave their Nigel. Like, that's just a fact. And so if you're not willing, you're not able to leave him, you have to impose consequences in other ways. So that might mean, matching his energy. For example, if he's not putting in energy around the home, that's when you start to pull back and stop contributing around the home. And, or, say he's not meeting your emotional needs, that's when you stop meeting his emotional needs. Let's say he's a selfish lover and hasn't made you come in 10 years, that's when you just stop having sex with him. Like, if he's not meeting your needs, then you stop meeting his needs. And he's not going to like that. And it's going to be seen as abnormal to him. And that's why we tell women, like, honestly, it's much easier to break up with a guy and start fresh with a new guy, because if he's used to a gravy train where things always work out in his favor without him having to really contribute, it's going to be really hard to have that mindset shift. If he's used to you being a doormat and having his needs catered to, he's going to resist, or he's going to fight those changes, right?
I mean, I have a perfect example of that, of a guy I was dating where there was like one day where I spent the entire day with him going to different clothing stores and watching him try on clothes, watching him try on shoes. Just spent the whole day with him. Wasn't like my ideal day or ideal way to spend a Saturday, but it was important to him. He'd ask my opinion about certain things he bought, and he just kind of likes, going around, I think, flaunting some of his money too about certain things he would buy. So I went with him. And then probably a couple weeks later, I was like, hey, I need to go purchase a new mattress. Would you mind coming with me to go mattress shopping? And he just flat out refused. And I was like, he's like, I don't want to spend my Saturday that way. And I'm like, well, a couple weeks ago, I spent time with you going from store to store, wasting my fucking Saturday, basically, like watching you try on clothes. Didn't really say much, was more than supportive. And then when it came to something that was actually important to me, you just flat out don't want to do it because you find it boring. And I'm like, okay, then I will never hang out with you and doing anything that I find boring ever. Right. And so at that point, the relationship's almost over, because besides that, there were several different other points in the relationship where I would express a need or he would want something, which I was fine with doing. But then when it came to return the favor, it was like completely non-existent on his part. He didn't feel like obligated or that he should have to. And so stuff like that, if that's a man's habitual pattern, there's nothing you can do but get rid of that guy. If it's like, if it's something where he's having like a lapse and not really seeing to the extent that things are getting really, really one-sided, then I think that's when you kind of employ the strategy of just straight up, okay, well, look, I'm going to reclaim my Saturdays to myself, and you do what you want to do, right? We're just going to spend our Saturdays doing what we actually want to do and not doing what the other person wants to do at the other person's expense. What one person wants to do at the other person's expense.
Yeah. And obviously in a healthy relationship, you should be able to, make these kinds of small sacrifices for your partner, like going shopping. If it's something important to them and it doesn't really cost you a whole lot, going shopping with them, why not? Like it's important to them. So, you should want to do that. If the man is not willing to do that for you, though, then like, what is there to talk about, right? Like, you know, if you're willing to do that for them and they're not willing to do that for you, then you're destined to have a one-sided relationship, and it's just going to lead to resentment. So if he refuses to demonstrate reciprocity, that's when you stop doing nice things for him. And that's just like, and I'm sure a lot of people, you know, a lot of people say that FDS, that we're promoting like emotional abuse, or that we're abusing men by, you know, oh, you're being controlling, or you're doing this and that. And it's like, you know, they say that withholding sex, for example, is quote unquote abusive. And it's like, no, if I'm not enjoying sex with this man, I'm allowed to say no.
I kind of think sex is different from other things. So I almost want to leave that to a separate topic, because sex is like not one of those things where I think women should just do it if they're not happy at all. Versus like if a guy wants to do something and it's just like, he wants to go to a baseball game. I don't like going to a baseball game, but I'll go. But I think it's a completely different thing to be like, fuck guys when you're not in the mood, right? It's going to make you.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying, is like, if you're not enjoying it, then don't have sex with him. They think it's emotionally abusive to impose consequences, and I don't think that at all. Like,
it's a basic rule of society that actions have consequences. So why they do the shocked Pikachu face when, if they're behaving shady, that the woman starts to pull back is just beyond me.
Well, because consequences are something that the dominant person imposes on the subordinate person. You think about like parents enforcing consequences to their kids when they're being bad. The government, you know, say you commit a crime, the government puts you in jail. That's the consequence for your actions. It's seen as very abnormal for women to impose consequences on men, and wrong, I think, because...
And every time you do, they call you crazy. Ask me how I know.
People are all about consequences when it's the subordinate person receiving the consequences from someone who's more powerful. But when women impose consequences on men, it's seen as wrong, because it's seen as abnormal for women to be in power.
And deep down, they believe that women shouldn't have boundaries. That's what it comes back to, that women should just be prepared to swallow whatever's, you know, served up to them at the relationship table.
Yeah. Anyways, mistake number 2, excessive praise for bare minimum behavior. And this is also known as the fawning response. And this is something that drives me crazy. I think we've all seen those kinds of memes where a husband did the dishes and the woman's like, oh my gosh, honey, like you did such a good job. Like you know, a man does something like buying her flowers and she just goes crazy. Oh my God, he bought me flowers. What an amazing, great guy he is. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are thinking, hey, so if everyone is motivated by fear of loss and desire for gain, and if I'm supposed to impose consequences for bad behavior, then I should impose rewards for good behavior, right? Not quite.
One of our mod rules used to be like, don't throw Scooby snacks to trolls. Don't throw Scooby snacks to the dogs.
Here's the thing, is like disproportionate praise for things that really should be considered normal only ends up stroking his ego when he hasn't earned it. And it just reinforces it makes him feel like he's amazing. He's an amazing boyfriend for doing something really, really minimal. And it teaches him that all he has to do is the bare minimum in order for him to continue to get a high reward. You're teaching him minimal investment equals high reward. And that's not a lesson that you want to be teaching him.
It sort of goes back to the idea that all men benefit from bad men, because, you know, bad men lower the bar so much to the point where if, you know, a man just, you know, barely touches the bar, he's seen as a superior being. And it's almost like society's way of rewarding, like basically reinforcing the bare minimum criteria in men. Exactly.
Yeah. You see this all the time when, like, you know, you see dads out in public playing with their kids. A dad takes their kid to the park and they're like, oh my God, he's such a great, like, I mean, sometimes don't get me wrong, there's also the suspicion of like, who is this man with this child? Is he kidnapping even if it's his kid, they're like, is he a pedophile? Is he kidnapping his own kid? So that does happen. But in a lot of cases, there's like, oh my God, he's such a great dad, like spending time, you know, babysitting. The phrase babysitting his own kid, that makes me crazy. It's your kid.
It's your kid.
Exactly.
You're not babysitting. It's your child. You're not being paid $20 an hour as an external relative. It is your offspring. You cannot babysit your own offspring. That's not how it works.
Right. So like, but here's the thing is like moms, you know, when you see a mom out in public with her child, like nobody thinks that that's exceptional. Like that's seen as normal. And also I find moms are treated like very harshly and treated with a very high bar. Men get rewarded for like really basic shit, like that like Taylor Swift video, The Man, I think it was, if I were a man, I'd take there's this one scene in the video where she's dressed as a man, she pats her kid on the head, and it's like Dad of the Year, and everyone's like praising him and stuff. So yeah, like this excessive praise for bare minimum behavior teaches men, it only reinforces the bare minimum behavior. It means that they have no incentive to go the extra mile. If you've already given 110%, how much, what are you going to do? Like give him your kidney or something? Like, you don't have that much more to give.
Even if you give him your kidney, he can still run off. Ask George Lopez, the comedian, what happened with his wife. So there's that.
And there's a way to show or to acknowledge what he's done without doing the excessive fawning over him as well. I think there's a fine line between the two that's some people don't quite get right. And then it crosses the line into praising men for literally doing the bare minimum. So, for example, I've seen a lot of videos go viral where a man is doing his daughter's hair. And I'll just be like, okay, good for him. But there are people like, yeah, Dad of the Year. Yeah, he's great. Yeah, king. That's what kings do. I was like, no, this isn't what kings do. This is just a man looking after his offspring. I can say, okay, cool, good for you, but that's about it. You can show appreciation or acknowledgement when they've done something good, but you don't have to be blowing hot smoke up their ass.
Exactly. I mean, again, it's about matching his energy. So say he takes you out for dinner and he pays for it at the end. You smile, say thank you. I'd love to see you again. Maybe a peck on the cheek or something like that. You don't have to be like, oh my God, you're such an amazing guy. Like, guys these days don't pay for dinner. And the fact that you paid for dinner makes you so special. Like that kind of stuff. That's just weird.
Right. And we talk about that because you talk about not giving men that much praise as well, because then it gives the impression that you're not used to being treated nicely.
You're not used to being treated well. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And men, if they get a sniff of that, they will use that against you. If they come to realize that you've been, treated less than stellar before, it makes them, for some men, it makes them believe, well, actually, she could be, it's basically fair game to treat her even worse. You don't want to give away your cards.
They think, oh, she would date a guy who treated her badly, then I can get away with treating her badly. And the other thing is, it's sad, but it's true that, like, if a man sees a woman and he knows that she's used to being treated badly, it decreases her value in his mind. As sad as it is,
yeah.
Even, so-called good guys or whatever. I see so many of these stories on Reddit where a woman is married and she tells a guy that she was either like sexually assaulted or abused or something like that. The man says, oh, it makes me see her differently. It makes me see her as less. And so, yeah, you don't want to give the impression to men, even the so-called good ones, that you've been treated badly in the past, because it's just going to decrease their perception of you.
If he asks, just always say you've been treated well and that your past relationships ended due to different goals or something like that.
We moved our separate ways.
We went on different paths.
Right. It's the same thing you do when you leave a bad job for a better job, right? You never
Exactly.
say, like, my boss was garbage.
Was an asshole, yeah.
Everybody I worked with was trash. You just say, well, I just felt that I could pursue better opportunities elsewhere. You have to give them the old PR answer.
I'm really grateful to my last company for all the opportunities, but I felt like I could further my development with you. That's what you need to say.
Right.
In fact, like even if I've had a really bad experience at a past job, I'll actually say positive things about the company. Like, I really liked how they invested in their employees. They really invested into their, education and like career development and blah, blah, blah. And I find when you do that, it makes the next company think like, okay, this is what this person has come to expect. And I mean, if you're interviewing with a company, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you, right? And so some of them will respond by being like, oh yeah, and here are the other like educational opportunities we offer our employees. Like if they're trying to, hire you, if they're motivated to hire you, they'll respond with something like that, right? If they're a company you don't want to work for, they'll be like, they won't have a positive reaction to that, and you don't want to work for them anyways. So even if you have had bad experiences, you're actually more likely to get the result that you want by giving the illusion, at least, that you've had a good experience in the past. And then if the other person is good, they'll want to match that. Yeah, so basically, it just goes back to matching his energy. He knows that if he wants to continue to receive your attention, he needs to reciprocate appropriately. Also, I want to rant about the, like, do not fucking do a sex for chores arrangement. Oh. I hate this so much. Oh. Have you seen those chore charts of like, oh, I do the dishes, I get a blowjob, like that kind of stuff? Have you seen those?
I saw a post on Reddit one time, and it was on our sex, which is normally like the typical sex posy community. And a woman was there saying that she was so proud of herself. She was like, oh, my boyfriend did the dishes today, so I gave him a blowjob, and I'll give him a blowjob every time he does the dishes because he never does the dishes. And even the comments were like, this is such a bad idea. Yeah. You know, you tying something like, I guess, your sexual pleasure to whether he washes up after himself. Like, even our sex was like narcissist. That would have got the narcissist flair on that subreddit. It's crazy.
First of all, it's like humiliating. Like, you're literally like debasing yourself so he can do dishes. Secondly, like, think more practically, what is the actual lesson that you're teaching him here? You're teaching him that if he wants a blowjob, he has to do the dishes. And so then he's not going to do the dishes unless you give him a blowjob. And then you're basically prostituting yourself for dishes. And like...
And then if he doesn't want a blowjob, then he's got no incentive to do the dishes. So you're screwed.
And so, yeah, sex should be for your pleasure alone. It should not be a carrot for him to do the dishes. You can withhold sex if he is displeasing you, because to have sex when he's displeasing you is not conducive to your pleasure. But to give him sex over unrelated shit like dishes or, you know, taking care of the kids or whatever, right? You're just undermining your own sexual pleasure in the long run. You know, at most, like, here's the thing. If at most, let's say you have a dead bedroom and, you know, he's complaining because he's not getting sex, and the reason why you have a dead bedroom is because his man-baby routine is a huge turnoff, because it fucking is. Who would want to have sex with someone they have to take care of like a child? At most, I would say I would have more energy for sex if you did more around the house and let him take the initiative. I have had conversations with that, like, with guys, and most of the time the guy will just get kind of defensive and be like, well, you know, you just have to ask, or, you know, maybe if you asked I would did it, or like, what do you mean I have to, blah, 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 you know, like, they'll go like that, and that's even more of a turnoff. Like, that's them badgering you for sex, right? That's even more of a turnoff, and that makes my pussy dry up that much more. Those are usually like spelling the end of that's like foreshadowing the end of the relationship. Like, if I say I would have more energy for sex if you helped more around the house, and he gets mad about that, then it's like, nah, never mind. Like, that's just the opposite of improvement.
This is why I'm so skeptical of the stories from men from our dead bedrooms who are like, my wife won't fuck me, and it's like, well,
it's probably your fault.
Are you helping her around the house?
Yeah, it's like, are you being attractive to her?
Yeah, you treating her like a Mummy McBang maid? Exactly.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, side note, when a woman's libido drops suddenly, a lot of the times it's because the man is... There have been past relationships where the man was being abusive to me, and my libido drops down into hell. Like, I think it's like an evolutionary adaptation where when you know that you're not safe, your body is just like, no, you can't make a baby right now, okay? Like, in general, like, women, in order for us to want to have sex, we have to feel safe, we have to feel cared for, we have to feel secure in the relationship and have energy for it. If we're exhausted, that's when your body's like, no, you've got way too much other stuff going on. You can't handle carrying a baby right now. And that's when your libido drops, right? So men out there, if their wife isn't interested in having sex with them, like, there are things that you can do, making her feel safe, being more attractive to her, making her feel secure.
Like, making her feel wanted and not just a maid.
Exactly. Like, make her feel like a woman and not just a servant, right?
But we're getting off track. So the point of the entire conversation was just saying, don't overpraise men for doing very bare minimum things.
Yeah, and don't fucking use sex as a currency, okay?
As a bargaining chip.
As a bargaining chip. Only have sex when you want to have sex. Sex is considered a reward to men. Oh, and the other solution on the topic of rewards is intermittent rewards. This might sound a little bit unethical, but honestly, when you only reward someone intermittently, it's actually more motivating than giving a consistent reward. Like there was a study about pigeons where when there's a button and if they press the button, they get a treat. And they found out that when you only give them the treat like 50% of the time, that's when the pigeon would just go crazy, like pressing the button, like ding, 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 because it creates the same effect in the brain as gambling. That's why people get addicted to gambling, is the intermittent reward, right? So if you want a guy to do something, a good way to get him to do it more consistently is through intermittent reward. My point being that like excessive praise is ineffective. You're actually better off like scaling back the praise and making it less frequent, not more. And it's less energy to you. But honestly, like the best solution to all this is knowing your worth. Like you are the prize. Your presence and your attention alone is his reward. I find a fawning response, that excessive praise response, usually comes from a person who is in a subordinate role. And you have to remember that you're a queen and it's his job to impress you. So the third mistake that women often make when they're trying to communicate or influence a man's behavior is by not being strategic in your interactions with men. And this one is pretty broad, but what I'm referring to is just this tendency that most people go through life being largely unconscious in their communication. You know, just like there's a stimulus and then they respond. It's just, you know, something makes you mad, you express anger. Something makes you upset, you emote sadness. I would recommend women to learn to be responsive instead of reactive. And so when you're interacting with men, always be mindful of your objective. Like, what is your goal? Are your actions conducive to achieving that goal? You know, are you going about this in a way that's going to, even if you're right, here's the thing, are you going about this in a way that's going to get you the result that you want? I had a friend the other day tell me that she wanted to bring her dad with her to therapy. And I was like, immediately I knew this would be a bad idea. Like her dad was kind of a deadbeat when she was younger. She didn't have much of a relationship. And now that they're adults, they kind of go for dinner sometimes. They go to the gym sometimes. They have somewhat of a relationship now as adults. But his abandonment of her when she was younger caused a lot of, issues for her, a lot of trauma. She has, I guess what most people call like daddy issues or whatever, not in a funny way, in a very sad way, actually. And so him being a deadbeat when she was younger really, really emotionally impacted her. And so she's been going to therapy about it. And she told me, like, I want to take my dad to therapy and I just want to let it all out. Because every time she tries to talk about the ways that his abandonment hurt her, he either changes the subject or he tries to turn it back on her or blame the mom or, whatever, anything to avoid taking accountability for the fact that he abandoned her when she was a kid. And so she's like, I want to take him to my therapist's office and I just want to let it all out. I want to have a moderator there. Like she basically thought the therapist was just going to be there to be a moderator to help navigate this conversation. And immediately I'm thinking this is a bad idea. And I ask her okay, what do you want to get out of this? And she's like, I just want him to know. And I'm like, why? What are you going to get from that? Why do you want him to know? And she couldn't explain why. She's just like, I'm just angry and I want him to know and he's just not getting it. And we kind of talk back and forth and I ask her, are you willing to cut him off? Because if you have this conversation with him, understand it's going to make things really awkward if you want to keep going to the gym and having dinner with him and stuff, right? What is your goal? Do you want to cut him off? No, she doesn't want to cut him off. Her goal is she wants to repair her relationship with her father and get closer with him. She didn't want to accept the fact that yelling at him for an hour while the therapist moderates it isn't going to be conducive to that. So, we kind of talked back and forth. She ended up realizing yeah, okay, maybe I'm going to go about this in a different way, because taking him to her therapist's office to just be angry at him isn't going to achieve her goal, right? So you have to be more mindful of what is your goal in this conversation? How are you going to go about achieving that?
The idea is to, when you're having interactions with men, keep in the forefront of your mind, what do I need and what do I want out of this situation? And secondly, what's the likelihood I'm going to get it, right? I feel like those are the two things.
Yeah. Be honest with yourself about yourself and the other person. is this going to work?
It seems in the situation with your friend, she was more or less venting. She just wanted someone to be present so that she could vent all of the things that she was feeling, thinking that would somehow, I want to say, make her feel better, or get her feelings across to her dad, which apparently maybe her points were not being fully taken seriously by her dad outside of the context of a therapist. But the question is, would a therapist actually be able to change that aspect of her dad? Mm-hmm. And would going to a therapist and just venting all your frustrations will that actually benefit you? Will that actually make you feel better? And the answer, it's, seemingly from an outsider, seems probably no and no, just from what we know about low value men. They just fundamentally don't care, right? Like, dragging them in front of a therapist isn't likely to change his behavior.
Like, I know her dad, and I know how it's going to go down. He's just going to get defensive. He's probably going to storm out of the therapist's office, so it'll be a waste of the hour, a waste of her money. He's not going to admit fault. He's not going to apologize. Here's what she wants is an apology, and she wants him to, like, make up for all the things that he didn't do when she was a kid.
Which he can't. Well, first of all, he may not apologize, and even if he does, it may not be sincere. And then, yeah, the last point, they can't make up for all the time that he missed when she was a kid. It's over now.
Exactly. Like, the best, and here's the thing, like, I can tell he definitely feels bad about, and this is just like what men are like, right? Like, they might feel bad about something. They might try to, like, make up for it later in life. And even if it's like, you can decide for yourself if it's too late and decide you don't want to deal with that, right? I can tell that he feels bad about it, and he is making up by, spending time with her now and trying to make it up to her. And he's trying to buy her forgiveness.
So the problem with that I even have with men who do that is, like, now they want to come back when it costs them way less personal sacrifice, right? Because she's an adult. She can take care of herself. She doesn't need nearly as much as her father as she would have as a child. And so a lot of these guys get old, start feeling their own mortality, and then suddenly want to do, like, a quick, like, Hail Mary towards the end of their life, so they're not destitute and alone when they're old and decrepit. So you still have to question his motives there, even if he's putting in seemingly doing performative effort to try to make up for lost time.
Yeah. No, I think that he just knows he's getting old and he's just looking for a free nurse, right?
Right.
So, he spent his, 20s and 30s and 40s just fucking around and being, like, a deadbeat. And now he's going back and being like, crap, like, I have all these kids and now, nobody's talking to me.
They all hate me, and none of them want to be bothered. Yeah.
And they all hate me, and none of them are going to he's thinking, like, oh, do I want to be sitting in an old folks home being one of those guys that, like, nobody visits, that never gets visitors?
Probably will be.
So that's pretty much what he's doing. He's trying to buy her forgiveness. And I'm, like, trying to tell her that. It's like, I love her to death. Like, she's one of my closest friends, honestly. But there are moments, sometimes you're talking to your friends and they're being a little bit of a pick-me, and it's like, I'm trying to communicate this in a way that's going to get the result that I want to, which is for her to be honest with herself about what her father's capable of doing and what his motivations likely are. Anyways, that's a sidetrack. But my point being, like, you can't just, like, emote at men. You can't just, like, vent at them. Even if you've had a bad day, in general, like, other people don't exist to be your emotional punching bags, like, male or female. Like, if you're having a bad day and you're feeling bad, like, save that for the therapist's office or find some kind of healthy coping mechanism or something like that so that you can deal with those feelings. But it's not healthy to go to and other people do this to me all the time. It drives me crazy, where, like, your loved ones don't exist to be your emotional punching bag. If you're feeling bad, deal with it. Don't put it on them. So, but let's just say you're angry at your partner. Like, you're not mad about work. You're not mad about something else. You're actually angry at something that your partner did. I'd say one of the most common ones is, nagging or, repeating yourself, basically. And nagging, I mean, when women nag, it's because you want your man to do something and he's just not doing it. And so you think, if I say it again 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times, then maybe he'll get it. And he won't. Here's the thing, like, with nagging, the more you repeat yourself, he's just going to tune you out. And he's just going to learn that your word doesn't matter and that he can continue to ignore you with no consequences. Nagging is basically what happens when the woman is just like, she wants him to do something, but she's too spineless to leave. Like, you hear all these stories of, my wife divorced me because I didn't do the dishes. And it's not just because of the dishes, right? Like she was probably saying like, this bothers me, this bothers me, this bothers me, this bothers me. And he just ignored her. And by the end of it, they always act blindsided, right? Like they always act like this came out of nowhere. Even if his wife was crying every single day for 20 years, he'll be like, this came out of nowhere. And the reason why they say that is because it wasn't that they didn't know that she was unhappy. It's that they didn't think that she would ever actually leave. The solution that I want to suggest is don't nag men. It's a waste of your emotional energy. It's just teaching him that your needs don't matter. Your word doesn't matter. Solution is the first time, ask nicely, introduce a boundary, and imply consequences. And if it happens again, you don't even say anything. You just implement the consequences. That's it. So let's say, you keep nagging him to pick up his shoes or put away his laundry or something like that. Instead of picking it up for him and asking him to do it next time, because picking it up for him just teaches him that if he falls through, you're just going to pick up the slack. Just stop picking up his shit. Stop doing his laundry. Stop giving him positive attention. And if he doesn't learn his lesson, then leave.
I saw this so much when I used to volunteer at the homeless shelter, where the staff would just be nagging, oh, please, can you wash up after yourself? Please tidy up after yourself. And it's just like, they never got better. If anything, it got worse because they knew there was no consequence. And this was a shelter that was pretty much 99% male. And they just knew that nothing would happen. So if you are going to make a request, there needs to be a consequence if it's not followed through. Apparently the staff there never got the memo, but hey-ho.
And tying it back to desire for gain and fear of loss, the thing that men have to gain from ignoring you is that they don't have to do as much work, right? Like this is the thing that is often left out, is that men actually benefit from ignoring women, from ignoring our needs, because it's effort. And, all humans would rather, here's the thing, all people, if you could get the same result with less effort, would you do it? Or would you choose the high effort or the low effort way if you could get the same result? You'd choose the one that's less effort. And so you have to make it costly for them to do it the way that you don't want. If they have the option between doing the dishes and their wife talks to them nicely, then they're going to go with that over, not doing the dishes and their wife leaving them, because if she left, that would make his life more difficult.
Yeah. So the strategy here, kind of to wrap up what you're saying, is to, one, if you communicate, have that communicate be enforced by either some kind of consequence behind it, or you don't even have to frame it giving him an ultimatum. If you ever watch reality TV shows, there's always some woman trying to give this guy some ultimatum who just clearly does not give a fuck at all. Have you ever watched that stuff? I'm going to go confront him about his cheating, or giving him an ultimatum. If he doesn't marry me today, I'm walking away. Nobody cares, right? But being strategic in interactions with men means really, really focusing on what you're feeling. And sometimes if they're the type of guy that actually responds to what you're feeling, then you can express how you're feeling, and that's good enough. If they're the type of guy that needs some kind of pushing or prodding, or needs some kind of objective reason. Although we just kind of say, if you need objective reasons to do things, it's pretty much a bad sign with men, because it means that they're not responding to the fact that shit just makes you unhappy. And if you're in a relationship, and you should just do things because they make the other person happy.
Yeah, a high value man is motivated, for him, making you happy is a gain to him. He sees that as a bonus.
Yeah, because it's you and him versus a problem, right? It shouldn't be you versus him, right? It should be, these are the things that need to get done. These are the things that I need to be happy in a relationship and in my life. And the answer should always be, how can I help you? Right? Instead of dismissive of it, saying, I don't need to do this, or trying to figure out reasons why he shouldn't have to do things because you didn't do things, right? This is the problem with so many men, is that they feel like everything that they do has to have some kind of justification. Otherwise it's invalid, right? It's never enough to be well, just make me happy, right?
Yeah. Well, because, a low value man making you happy is not seen as motivating.
It's not high on his priority list. Yeah.
It's not a priority, right? For a high value man who really does care about you, the reward is seeing the smile on your face, is, you feeling safe and secure and so on. And so that is inherently rewarding to him. A low value man who doesn't see any value in making you happy is never going to make you happy, no matter how much you try to negotiate or poke and prod or compromise or whatever. As a side, like compromising, I mean, I also have like this whole list. Compromising is another one of those, like, it usually just means the woman is acquiescing to whatever the man wants. Never make, not just in your relationships with men, but, never make concessions unless you're actually getting something out of it. Compromise isn't just like, okay, we'll do what you want.
Yeah, and be careful that he's not trying to move the Overton window, because they'll do that too. They'll pick something like absolutely outrageous and then try to make it seem like it's the equivalent of what you're arguing for. He'd be like, well, can you just pick up your socks off the floor? He's like, well, you didn't give me anal sex for 3 nights in a row, so, and they'll just try to make it seem like that's the equivalent. So, I mean, there's just so many ways.
False equivalency. That's another way that...
False equivalent. See that? Yeah, we'll do another episode on more like low value male manipulation tactics, because I think that's an important overall discussion. But when you're going into your communications with men and trying to be strategic, watch out for these things and keep your goals in mind.
Yeah. And a lot of these, I'm not even just talking about your boyfriend or your husband. I'm also talking about like your boss or your coworkers or your dad or, other male family members and so on. Because, we say, oh, if he's not doing this and that, just leave. Well, you can't just like break up with your dad, right? Like you're probably going to have to see them at family gatherings and so on. So, sometimes it's not, just leave isn't always an option. Sometimes you do have to interact with these people, whether you like it or not. And even if you have to interact with those people, some of these strategies can work to at least like minimize losses for you and like maximize rewards as much as you can. Oh, and one last thing about, because you mentioned confronting, like, I'm going to go confront him about his cheating. That's another terrible idea. Confronting him isn't going to make him like uncheat you.
So let's make that a fourth strategy. But like the fourth mistake women make is like confronting men for the sake of confronting them.
Dr. Romney has a really great video about why you should never confront a narcissist. And I think it applies to just all shitty people in general. Like, what are you going to get out of it, right? Nothing. Like, it's just going to give them an opportunity for them to lie to you and manipulate you and frustrate you and waste your energy and make your head spin. And also, the other thing is that just like, you're just showing them your cards. So, it's almost better for them to not know that that's when it's like they start throwing hands. That's when they get more aggressive and they go nuclear.
I've got an example of the confrontation thing, actually. I was dating a guy last year and he did something really egregious. We were talking about it, I think a few weeks just like afterwards, where we randomly like reconnected for a bit. And he was so confused as to why I was not basically just cussing him out. And he was almost like insulting himself, almost like saying stuff like, so he was saying stuff like, oh, did you tell your friends about that dickhead who did, just like XYZ to you? And I was like, no. So he was really thrown off by the fact that I was literally not cussing him out, because that's clearly what he expected I would do. And obviously I was really, I'd cussed him out to like my therapist and anyone who'd listen, but I didn't tell him that because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of, knowing that he really got to me, and that really threw him off. So he started basically insulting himself, basically revealing.
He was probably doing that to try to elicit your sympathy. He wanted you to jump in and be like, no, baby, you're not a dickhead. Like, I forgive you.
I did. Yeah, but I didn't like correct him, but I was just like, no, I didn't. And he literally said, like, I'm trying to work out why, I don't understand why you're not angry. Because I just refused to show him that I was angry.
Yeah, no, that's smart. Like, ladies, you gotta have emotional self-discipline when dealing with guys.
Vent to your friends, vent to your therapist, vent to the stranger down the street, but don't send him paragraphs. Just don't do it.
Yeah, the typing in paragraphs, it's like, you're not gonna make him feel bad. If anything, he's just gonna see that and he's gonna have that, like, smug sense of satisfaction that he provoked a reaction out of you, right?
And it'll probably save you as, like, the crazy chick, in quotation marks, in his phone to show to his friends.
He'll probably, like, screenshot it and put it in his, like, group chats and be like, haha, look at this girl who's obsessed with me,
Yeah. Oh, she's crazy.
Circling back to, like, desire for gain, fear of loss, like, even negative attention, men weirdly seem to see that as a gain. They see that as a reward. The ultimate consequence that you as a woman can impose on men is a lack of attention, or just ignoring them, or withholding your presence.
Or apathy. just straight apathy.
Or just complete apathy. Yeah, because like men want women to men want women's attention, positive or negative.
And they want women to react to them as well, to what they're doing. They want that reaction because it signals to them that you're invested in the situation or in them. And when you don't give them that reaction, it really throws them off balance. Like if you were to remain just completely stoic in front of men, it will start to come out just how they'll start goading you almost just to get a reaction out of you, like what happened to me. And when you don't bite, it will really confuse them because they don't know what you're thinking as well. Like he was clearly almost, in my situation, he was clearly trying to guess what I was thinking, but I wasn't telling him if he was right or wrong. And that really bothered him when you don't know what someone else is thinking, especially when you've screwed them over in a massive way. And he knew that as well.
Yeah, I find like, men are so used to women just like emoting. And so here's the thing, like men are not scared of women's anger the same way that women are afraid of men's anger, because men's anger is like scary and violent. Women's anger, like men see it as like amusing. They don't actually feel like they're in any physical danger. I find like cold anger to be much, much more effective for influencing men. Like if you just blow up at him, he's just going to dismiss you as crazy and he's just going to like ignore you and he uses it as an ego boost. When you have this like sort of cold anger, it almost like switches some part in his brain and you become like this cold and dispassionate mother that he wants to win the approval from. So yeah, like that's why like emotional self-discipline, ladies, like highly recommend. So just to wrap it up, it's important to be strategic in your communications with men. You have to understand the sort of power dynamics at play, the different socialization that men and women have had, and therefore our different motivations. And first of all, like have emotional self-discipline, understand that appealing to men's empathy or morality is not going to be as effective as appealing to desire for gain and fear of loss. And don't excessively praise men for bare minimum behavior because it's just not going to get you the result that you want. When interacting with men, you always have to be mindful of your goal and whether your actions are being conducive to helping you achieve that goal.
All right. And that's our show. Follow us on Twitter at fem.strat, as well as visit our website, thefemaledatingsstrategy.com. And if you'd like to hear some bonus content, go to patreon.com/thefemaledatingsstrategy. Thanks for listening, queens. And for all you scrotes out there, make sure you invest in your kids early so you don't end up alone in a pool of your own dribble. Die Mad. See you next week.